Welcome to the Story Copywriter Podcast, the show that teaches you everything you need to know to write stories that sell and become the written voice of a business you love. With me, your host and founder of Story Copywriters, Rob Drummond.
So as far as I can tell, there are three reasons to tell your story in your marketing. The first one is to entertain, the second one is to educate, and the third reason is to enlighten. And those are in order because you can't educate until you've got someone's attention. So you kind of have to entertain them somehow first, and you can't enlighten them until you've educated them. And enlightenment is all to do with upgrading someone's level of thinking about you and your topic. But ultimately, we're not trying to do this to be altruistic. We're trying to move people towards the point where they're ready to raise their hand and say, yes, I'm interested in working with you, in hiring you for the big high value project or service or whatever it is. And I have to say that when it gets to that point, that's kind of not my wheelhouse in terms of how best to present that offer, how best to structure that offer. So I'm really happy today to have Angela Tsai. Have I said your surname correctly? Angela Tsai. Yeah.
Perfect. Well done.
It just occurred to me now. I've never actually said your surname before. So I've got Angela on the call. So I've known Angela for a while through the Six-Star Business community.
Yes.
And actually, before we get into the topic, I wanted to say, so we've been connected on LinkedIn for a while, and I'd say that you're probably one of the more active people that I follow on LinkedIn, and you're very prolific in terms of putting stories on LinkedIn, sharing personal stories, which immediately catapults you into the realm of de facto being a story copywriter. But I wondered how that, have you always been doing that on LinkedIn? And what has the outcome been is probably the first question.
Wow. I love that question. And especially that you, who is someone who that I very much admire in the storytelling space, actually would categorize me as someone in the storyteller copywriting space. So thank you for that, first of all.
We're all storytellers. It's just a lot of us haven't realized it yet.
Yeah, absolutely. So to answer that question, no, I haven't always been like that. For the first 2 years of running my business, to be honest, I didn't post almost a single thing on LinkedIn because I was absolutely terrified of what people from my past career were going to think of me. I just, I had this idea that, LinkedIn was a certain space. There was a certain image that I hadn't.
It is for business.
At that point. Yeah, I hadn't at that point, really shared. So first, I think starting to post things onto LinkedIn, it was definitely a journey in the beginning. And if someone, scrolls like far back enough, I don't even know if you can scroll that far back, if LinkedIn keeps all of these things, but you'll see that a lot of my posts, at that time, like if I read back, I feel like it feels very rigid. It feels that when I did start posting, I felt like I needed to have something that I had to say, something worthy to say. And, this pressure that you put on that, it almost comes through, and the storytelling, it isn't something that really flows in.
It's a bit contrived to force fit it to the message.
Absolutely. So it's definitely been a journey, but I'm really, really super chuffed that the storytelling is coming through, and that you recognize that. It's awesome.
What kind of engagement? I mean, obviously, I only see what I see, but what kind of engagement do you get from other people from it?
Quite good, actually. I actually spoke with an ex-mentor of mine, and this is a funny thing that I know we're jumping straight into the meat of it. A lot of people, when they go into business and they've had like a corporate career, they experience a similar sort of fears. They don't want to put themselves out there on LinkedIn because they're worried about what people think. Really super, super common. What they don't realize is that a lot of people are watching, a lot of people are lurking. So just because you're not getting engagement doesn't mean that things aren't resonating. And I actually spoke with a couple of people that I really, really looked up to, I respected back in my corporate days. They were my mentors. There were people I worked with, people that I was basically worried about, what they would think of me when I post on LinkedIn. And they were the ones that actually approached me and say, hey, you know, really like what you're doing. And this was privately. So they never engaged on LinkedIn at all. So I literally didn't even realize that they had seen my posts or anything like that. But one of the mentors that I worked with for quite a long time, he was quite a significant individual during my career building. He said to me that he noticed a distinct shift in my content, you know, compared to a couple of years ago. He said, I felt like at that time you sort of really it felt like you really needed to have something to say, but now you're just saying, you're just in it, you're just in the middle, you know, like there's no trying to
there's
like
no filter.
anything. Yeah, and funny enough, that's the kind of content that's being the most engaging. I find that sometimes when I call it sort of like a stream of consciousness. So a little while ago, when my mind was quite cluttered, I was trying to like get clarity. I started doing this exercise, which you're probably aware of because you're a writer. It's similar to morning pages where you just sort of like dump a lot of your thoughts, like a stream of consciousness. Some of my best performing content has actually been just literally snippets that are being lifted out of that stream of consciousness that has been a little bit more tidied up to make sure it actually has
you can never predict which ones are going to get the most engagement.
Absolutely.
And it's always the ones you almost didn't post that
that's
actually
right.
generate the most conversations.
That's right. Because if you think about like even just if you look at movie trailers don't take you from beginning to end. They don't say, okay, this movie is going to be about this. And then after that, you know, we're going to take you through the structure of XYZ. And at the end, you're going to get a big surprise or whatever. They throw you right in the middle of the action. And that's the kind of content that resonates with people.
I think there's often themes of like universal struggle in terms of, I obviously really engage with your posts about, you know, when, is it Aria, your daughter's name?
Yes.
Yeah, when she's been sick and she's been sent home from nursery and it's completely derailed your work day. You had all of these big goals and aspirations, and it's like, yes, that obviously resonates with me because I also have small children who, to some degree, are ruining my life. Well, that's what I like to tell people.
Kicking you in the head at 3 a.m.
They've stolen my mornings, and I resent it. So that resonates. But it's like, even if you didn't have kids, I think that would still resonate because it's a human story about struggle. And
that's right.
But I think what you're then doing is you're then tying it to your message in a sort of sensible way, rather than kind of, it doesn't feel like it's force fitted, if that makes sense. And there's a degree of art to that, I think.
Yeah, I think it's a degree of art, but it's also a degree of just letting go of that forced expectation on yourself. I think once you get to that level of clarity around what you do, it's amazing. Like, you know, I'm walking my daughter to childcare in the morning, and the dots are just connecting. It's like, oh, this thing connects to that, this thing connects to that, this thing connects to that. And you start to see how there's relevance in the everyday. But when you don't have that clarity, there's just too much. Like there's too much to sift through. And that's when you feel like you have to sit down and force yourself to structurally try to find the connecting points in different sort of stories and situations. And that comes across in your content. And maybe that's something that is a part of the process, is just simply a part of it that, you know, it takes a while to get to that clarity. Then everything starts to, you know, link into the central point. But yeah, I think
that's a really profound point. Like if you're scrabbling to get to the heart of your core message, I think then finding examples and anecdotes that are going to illustrate that message is going to be difficult, because you're still trying to grasp at the heart of what you're trying to say. Correct. So you came from corporate life. What did you do in your corporate life, and how has that transitioned into what you do today?
So back in my corporate life, I mean, it's like, how do you articulate what you did in your corporate life? I didn't have one of these roles where I could say that, you know, this is what I did. I sort of did a lot of everything. And that was, I think, a part of what made it so difficult when I jumped into business, because I had done so many things and I had built experience over so many different areas. Like there was strategy.
I'm going to raise my hand for that observation as well. I think we need to create like a support group for like recovering like recovering generalists.
Yes, recovering generalists. And then suddenly you're thrust into this world where you can't be a generalist, because a generalist doesn't stand out. You know, you need to find your specialization, but then that requires choice. And back in the corporate days, being a generalist was a strength because people are like, oh, wow, we can put you in so many places, Angela or Rob, you're super adaptable. We can put you here, we can put you here, we can put you here. And obviously you're trying a lot of things, you're navigating through your career. So I was definitely in one of these buckets. My last role that I left was a sort of a cross between product offerings and strategy, business development and marketing. So it was like sort of everything together. So at that point, my role was to take, so I worked for one of the largest consultancies in the world, Accenture, and my role was to take the marketing skill sets and the marketing capabilities across the entire organization, which was at that point about 10,000 people that were doing marketing campaigns and all kinds of like different data analytics, all types of different marketing work, and sort of amalgamate all that and bring it together into packaged and specific offerings that were going to be well positioned in the market. And I love that. I think that was definitely a place that I first started to get a sense of what offering was. I think when people asked me what I did at that time, I basically said I'm in product, because that's what I see offering to be, and still very much related to marketing. But yeah, when I left that world, so my background is in marketing. I studied marketing. I've dabbled in parts of marketing throughout my corporate career, but never really as a practitioner. I was always more on the strategy side of things and the management side of things. And when I jumped into business, firstly, it was really fun because I actually got to do hands-on a lot of the stuff that, I kind of knew about. I kind of knew how things worked at a high level strategy level, but never actually got into myself. And that was a really sort of fun exploration, just rolling up my sleeves and doing things until it got to the point where I realized I actually need to make money from this.
Yeah, you can be the starving artist. And
yeah, that's right. That's right. So that was what I did back in the corporate days. I don't know. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. It does. And like it feels like there was germ that it feels like there was the beginnings of what you're doing today in those corporate days of like, yes, because you're a journalist, they could throw you into any swimming pool and you would swim. But it feels like there was some work in there that must have been like, when you do the work that you really feel like you're supposed to be doing, and it's like but sometimes in a corporate role it's kind of fleeting because you're doing so many different things. And then what happened for me was a sort of similar-ish journey, but then you kind of set out by yourself and you realize that there's an awful lot that you don't know, and that it takes time to kind of find your path into what you really should be doing that leans into your kind of genius zone.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a journey of discovery for sure. I mean, I think about those early days when I first left business and first left corporate and jumped into business. I mean, I had no clue what I was doing. I mean, I could jump into a lot of things. I jumped into immediately some freelance consulting, and I had people in my network that were like, oh yeah, you can come and do some work for us and all of that stuff. I'm like, oh, this is great. This is great. I'm in business and I'm doing stuff for myself. Like, yeah, this is easy. This is working. And it got to a certain point where I just realized that, you know what, I'm pretty much burning out because I had no plan. I had no plan. I was just like trying to do things. And the only thing that was basically connecting me to the fact that I was a business owner, no longer an employee, was that I had a registered business. That was essentially it. But for the rest, I was still in that place where I felt burnt out. I wasn't living the lifestyle I wanted. I was working all these crazy hours. I was at that point doing a consulting project for a board of a life science company. And, I was working weekends. I was pulling together board presentations. I was, talking with the CEO, and my dad was visiting at the time from Australia. Like he hadn't come to see me in Europe for pretty much years. This was the first time. And I didn't have any time to spend with him because I was just stressed. I was stressed about the work. I was stressed about delivery. I was delivering. I was, doing all the business development. I was having to think about, okay, what next? Managing the business side of things. And it just, I think I got to that point where I was like, you know what? This wasn't what I got into business to do. This wasn't why I left my previous life behind. So yeah, that was I guess a next point in trying to figure out, what this business looks like. And it
I think
sounds like
I think we all go through that phase, like surely we all get into
Yeah.
business and then it's not what you expected, or you end up tired, burnt out, doing so many things,
That's it.
trying to run the business, even though you've got no real experience in doing that. I think we all just have to go through that phase. And I think unless you go through that phase, it's very difficult to kind of progress. I'm sometimes reminded of the Airbnb founders who commented that they actually launched 6 times. It's just that nobody noticed the first 5.
That's really interesting. I didn't know that. I'll have to look into that story.
Yeah, I'll have to find the quote. So then your business today, can we explore that in terms of what does your day look like now? So compared to that phase, how does your workday look now?
So workday at the moment looks really, really good. I have a business partner, as you know, and for those of you that are listening, my business partner is Christina. She is my best friend. We've known each other for literally about, we say 25 years, but to be honest, we stopped counting. So I don't actually know exactly how many years it's been. We've known each other for a very, very long time. But last year, when I had my baby, I don't know, there was so many things that shifted. So I'm someone that has always been this typical sort of A-type, ambitious, driven personality. It was what carried me through my corporate days. It was what carried me through the first couple of years of business, where I was like, yeah, go, 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 go. I could work all the hours. And for some reason, I just wouldn't get tired because I was so passionate and driven and loved basically working, to be honest. I just loved it. And we sat down because everything literally just turned upside down when I had my baby. And, obviously just before this, we were talking about our kids, and you've been through a very similar journey with, the
2 premature babies.
The premature babies. And, my baby came 2 months early. And that was a massive shock because mentally, emotionally, nothing was ready for the baby, but she arrived. And I think in that shock moment to my system, everything just changed. Like, priorities started to shift. It took me out of that, I guess, that flow that I had been so used to. And we sat down, me and Christina, to have a 5-year planning session, just looking forward in terms of, okay, how do we see our business in the next 5 years? What do we want? And both of us, we come from consulting backgrounds. And I think, naturally, at that time, she was just about to jump into the business as well. Well, no, actually, at that point, she had already fully come into the business. And, for her, she was like, yeah, we can do consulting, we can do this, we can do that, we can go for the big corporates, all of that stuff. And I said to her, I only want to work 15 or 16 hours a week, 15 to 16 hours a week. And this is coming from someone who, in my entire career, and especially in my last role, I worked in management consulting environment, which is super hectic. 80 to 90-hour weeks were not unusual. And for me, I was more than happy to pour a similar amount of effort into my business, just because now I was no longer working for someone, but it was actually something I'm fully passionate about. So I think that shift to go from that point to me saying, like, you know what? I only want to work 15 to 16 hours a week on business because I want to be there. I want to be there as a mom. I want to be there, for my child. I don't want my child to be brought up by nannies and other people. I want my child to feel like, I'm there in her life and she's got that full attention from me. But at the same time, I've always known that I'm not someone who could be a full-time stay-at-home mum. I do that once a week on Tuesdays. And I quickly realized
it's the hardest day of the week, isn't it?
I can't do it. I think I'm most tired. I'm most tired on Tuesdays.
There's nothing. So I do the same on Mondays, but there's nothing that my clients can throw at me that's harder than my day with Rumour on Mondays and having a mark. So she's a bit older. She's 3, but she's a terror.
Oh, man.
But that's forced me to grow. It is one of my core stories, I think. And I think what the story that you just told, like that transformation, that change in mindset from doing the 80-hour weeks to the 15-hour week, and what that means internally, I think that's part of your core story.
Absolutely. And I think it's very much become a part of both of our stories as well, because in that moment we talked about it, we realized, what, we don't we both have big things that we want to build out. I know Christina has also like massive things in like what she wants to build out in the next, 10, 15, 20 years. But we know that we don't want to spend all of our time working. Like it doesn't make any sense. It's what we've been used to all of our lives. Like you work 40 hours a week, you get X amount of money coming into the bank account, and then you take 6 weeks of holidays a year. It's just what's normal. And to completely sort of twist that upside down, to say that, you know what, now we've got our own business, we can make our own rules. We can actually find more scalable ways to make the same level of money that's still going to give us that lifestyle, but still actually create time for us to spend on other things that we feel are more important, whether that be our family, whether that be pursuing our other passion projects. And yeah, I mean, I think it's created a complete shift for both of us, just in thinking about our business this way. And I know, she's on the verge herself now of having her first baby, very much on the same page that, this is what we're pursuing for our day-to-day in the business.
This is really exciting. This to me is like the new renaissance. This is why I'm really passionate about helping people to tell their stories, because I think if you can understand your story, understand yourself, tell your story, organize your life in the way that makes sense to you, not in the way that society dictates. I think that's how we progress. I think we can, develop a society of empowered people and empowered at an individual level. I think that's how we move forwards.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Back when we were brainstorming around the naming and sort of messaging and like what exactly this business was that we were creating and the core program that we run, I think the one phrase that continues to come back, and it's what we like every time I think about, okay, what is our business actually about? I mean, in a nutshell, like as a label, you'll see on my LinkedIn, I've got Offer Coach on there. We help people with their offers. But in a nutshell, like what we do day in and day out is we help people to make money doing what they love. That is literally the core mission of our entire business. It just so happens that at the moment we're helping people to do that through getting their offers right.
So the offer's more of a mechanism to achieve that transformation.
Absolutely. But so often I think that, we leave our corporate lives and we're not liking who we are. I know I was there, and that was one of the reasons that I left.
That's why people leave. That's why people get.
That's why people leave. Yeah, you're not liking the lifestyle. You're not liking the person that you're becoming, and you end up in business and pretty much recreating that same sort of circumstance and situation around you. And you're just feeling trapped now because you feel like you have to keep going because now you're in this and you need to make the money and all of that stuff. And in many ways, you're like feeling probably worse than you were back when you were in your corporate days. So yeah, it's very much all around that, just helping people to go into business, make that leap successfully, but also make sure that they're creating a business where they love their life and they love who they are in that business as well.
I think there's an element as well of like, so one of the books that I recommend people read is Unreasonable Success by Richard Koch. And he describes that, yes, you should have big ambitions. Yes, you should have mentors, but you also have to wait until like the time is right. Strike at the right time. It's one thing having big plans, but sometimes life is going to smack you in the face. And I very much felt that over the last few years. And then it just feels like you get this kind of message where it's like, okay, it's time to press on. And that's kind of how I've been feeling this year anyway.
Yeah.
Sometimes you try to force it through when it's like, well, perhaps it isn't the right time. Yeah,
I think sequencing is definitely a big thing. I mean, quite often, like business owners and entrepreneurs, like it's super, super passionate. And that's why the corporate life was never.
That's why we like run into things as well, isn't it?
It is. And I don't know if you had this when you were going through your transition. And I mean, I know we talked about that in previous conversations that we've had, but it's just, I think for a lot of people that go into business from corporate, it's this feeling of itchy feet that's always there. A lot of people, they don't act on that itchy feet or that feeling of just feeling, restless because they're scared. They're scared of making the jump. They're scared of losing that stability and all of that stuff. But I feel like that's almost an indication that, you're born for something more. You who you are is actually made to become something more. It's all about fulfilling that potential. But then once you go into business and all of that's kind of like released and you can just unleash and do all of these things and go after this unreasonable success that you were talking about. Quite often we don't we can't see the right sequencing of the steps. You just see this big thing that you want to be or you want to create, this big impact, but not that, there's certain steps that you need to be able to get there. It's kind of like, I guess if I think about, how I could visualize that, it's like, okay, you see a mountain in the distance, mountain distance, this is my destination where I want to go. But what you don't know is that there's like lots of winding paths, and the way that you need to go is not going to be like a straight route. Like you can't just like tunnel your way through like all of the different obstacles that are over the next.
And there's going to be more obstacles that you can't even see yet.
You can't see them. You can't see them exactly. But you need to be able to pave a path to be able to get there. And yeah, I think a big part of it is that, you have that vision in mind, but then once you have that vision, what are the steps? What's step one? What is the first thing you need to build to be able to move towards that mountain?
I think a realignment that I've been trying to make is I've probably been weak on the vision and too busy cracking on with the steps.
So you're not even.
It's always been the reverse problem where like I've had a shortage of vision that I'm trying to think a bit bigger.
Yeah.
Let's talk about kind of offer creation then. So for helping people craft a really successful offer is kind of the mechanism for delivering this transformation that you provide. What would you say is like the most common mistakes that you kind of see people making?
It's a really, really good one. So I think common mistake definitely is that very often people don't realize that their offer is the problem. So they think that it's everything else. So how we started in this offer business, and maybe it's useful to talk about that first,
yeah, please do.
That, I mean, we didn't set out to be offer coaches. We didn't say that, one day we're like, hey, this looks like a good business. This looks like a good business. Let's become offer coaches. It was something that was born out of us trying to solve what I thought was a different problem for my clients. So I started out, I was running a marketing agency. That was one of the first iterations of the business of what it is today. And we were helping a lot of coaches and consultants to run their marketing because they were coming to us. They're like, yeah, we've been working with different agencies and it's just not getting results. And, after talking to them, we said, okay, let's help you to create like a full scale, like marketing engine that's tailor-made. It's for your audience, all of the different steps and really keeping in mind that entire customer journey. But what we realized as we were going through that journey of like running campaigns, designing and running campaigns, is that we had to keep going back to the start, because people weren't clear on what it was that they were selling and why customers should buy them. It's
like from an engineering perspective, it's like having a faulty, like if you're building, I don't know, a skyscraper, it's like having a faulty foundation. Like it's just going to fall down.
That's right. So, I mean, like every one of these clients that we started working with, they were convinced that they knew what their product was. They were convinced, we know who our customer is, we know what they want. This is the message and all of that stuff. And yes, we applied all of our marketing know-how and the skill sets that I had gained while I was doing all of that self-education when I first jumped into business with, marketing and copy and story psychology and all of that stuff, especially with advertising, which was the bulk of what we were focusing on in the beginning. And we were coming up with lots of hooks. We're coming up with hooks, angles, well-structured copy, like call to actions, all of that stuff. But it was getting a bit of traction, but it just wasn't really what we wanted to see in terms of numbers we wanted to get. So we went back to the beginning. Let's, actually validate. It doesn't seem like your audience are responding to this. Let's go back to it. And that was actually where we really realized that this was such a gap. So you asked me, what's the biggest mistake that a lot of people are making when it comes to offers? I mean, I would say the biggest mistake is that most people, they don't realize it's even their offer in the first place. Most people think that it's a problem with their messaging. They think it's a problem with their marketing. They think it's a problem with their positioning, with, their LinkedIn profiles not clear.
These are the clients that hire a new Google Ads agency every year because it's clearly the agency's fault. The magic solution is out there somewhere.
Yeah, that's it. And it's really, really confusing for people because there are so many solutions out there. And so much of it really, I guess, is talking about the same thing. And absolutely, like, yes, once you have that clarity around what you're selling and who it's for and what the solution is and how that all connects to a market need, then yes, absolutely, like, you need to work with that right right agency or right partner to help you be able to start to scale that and put the marketing building blocks in place. But without that initial clarity, like everything sort of falls down. So I would say that that's definitely one of the biggest one. I think another big mistake that we see quite often is that people don't actually really want to do an offer because they think that it limits them in some way. So I think there's a lot of fear when people jump into business. And I have to say a lot of this comes from baggage that we carry with us back in the corporate days. It's like being a generalist, the recovering generalist thing that you were talking about before. It used to be a strength. It used to be a skill set. It was something that made us useful in an organization's context. And in a business space, it's sometimes scary to say, you know what, I can do all these things, but I'm not. I'm going to do this. I'm only going to do this and get known for this. And I think a lot of people are afraid that by, limiting themselves in some way when they think about offers, it's like, oh, that means I need to cut off all the other things that I can actually do. That it somehow is going to take something away from them, whether it's opportunity, so fear of losing the opportunity, or fear of, being limited in terms of the type of potential that they can create for themselves.
Just thinking in terms of my work, there's a lot of work that I still do but I've relegated to, it's an experiential thing where people find when they actually work with Rob that I am under the surface, I am still a generalist, and for the right clients, I'm sometimes the best placed person to do some of this stuff. Although not, I'm not trying to be the outsourced marketing department anymore, but it's relegated to the background, and I'm trying to keep it out of the frontline offer a bit more.
Yeah, no, I think it's a smart move. I mean, I definitely wouldn't have picked you as a generalist at all, and having known you for for a while, and I also follow your content and the things that you post on LinkedIn and just your podcast. Obviously, I've been listening to that and really, really enjoying it, by the way. And yeah, I wouldn't have picked you as a generalist at all.
All right, good. So I do a good job of hiding it then.
Yeah.
That's great. I wanted to ask you about, you put a post on LinkedIn about the trigger, and that caught my attention. So it caught my attention because it prompted a memory. So one of my favorite marketing books is Sean D'Souza's book, The Brain Audit. And he talks about the trigger being the point at which you kind of pair together the problem and the solution to get someone's attention at that moment. And I wondered if you could talk about that and how that relates, how you would frame the trigger.
Yeah, I love that. I actually have been reading this book since you recommended it to me, and oh my gosh, it's such a brilliant recommendation. So thank you so much, firstly, for
it's great as well because it's a beautiful book to read because he's a cartoonist. So it's got the aesthetic value as well. Yeah.
It explains a lot because a lot of the examples that he gives, they're very simple examples, but they almost create like sort of visual, very simplified cartoon images in your head as he's talking through it. But yeah, no, that actually explains a lot. I'm definitely going to check him out a little bit more. But yeah, going back to your question about the trigger and just like framing around that, because I do really enjoy also how he talks about that as well. And I was just thinking about that even this morning as I was walking, because one of the examples that he talks about is this lemonade stand example. So he talks about, young kids that open lemonade stand and it's a hot day, and how do they make sure that this lemonade stand is actually going to get the attention that they want. And yes, if you are just happen to be in, where I live, which is like, this not that Isleworth, so it's like very, very sort of empty. And there's only one lemonade stand on the side of the road, and it's a hot day, then probably you're going to get all the customers. But what if there's like multiple, like it's like an entire street of lemonade stands? Like, how are you actually going to stand out? And it's really, really interesting because he talks about it in that, you want to make sure that I think he said like germ-free lemonade or something like that, where it's going obviously after the germaphobes, something which is very specific and calling out the person.
Calls out the problem as well, but
calls out the problem, exactly. But then I was thinking, okay, but here's the problem, right? Because everyone is saying that they're different now. You know, that's actually the biggest problem at the moment on LinkedIn, social media, you know, all those different platforms, like all the businesses, every business feels like they're unique. Every business is unique, but they're all saying the same thing. You know, they're all saying like, you know, we're different. We're all about doing things differently. And, you know, this is the unique thing that we do and all of that stuff. So here's the challenge. Like, what if every single one of those lemonade stands all had their unique thing? Like, what would be the thing then that actually makes it different? And I think, you know, coming back to the trigger, a lot of it, again, you know, it has to do with getting specific. Like, you have to be specific in that clarity and that directness, in firstly knowing what that trigger is, but also I would actually add an additional layer to it. And this is one of the things that we talk about a lot in the work that we do with clients, which is knowing where you're actually meeting your clients on a sort of an awareness spectrum. And every single person that you speak to, they're going to have different trigger points. And those trigger points, they sit across a spectrum of awareness. So you have on one end of the spectrum, you have the people that are the most aware. They're the people that, you know, have extensively researched lemonade stands, and they have extensively researched the best place to go for lemonade. And they know exactly the store that they need to go to in order to get the quality that they want. And
Eugene Schwartz's levels of awareness, wasn't it, from breakthrough advertising? Yeah,
that's right, exactly. And then you've got at the other end of the spectrum just people that are completely even unaware that they have a problem in the first place.
They're bleeding and they don't even know it.
That's it. So I think when it comes to the trigger, it's a tricky one, because I think the mistake that a lot of experts make is that they're only aware of the trigger, which is at a point that people are ready to hear the solution. And that's just, you know, it's great. It's great to identify the trigger at that point. But the problem is about, you know, 80 to 90% of your
There's only so many of those people, and it's a very competitive market for their attention. Very expensive, very competitive.
That's it. So I think it kind of creates a different layer to understanding the trigger, because you almost sort of need to be aware of the mindset that people are and the thoughts that are running through their mind. And what is that trigger that's going to get them to sort of wake up and realize that, you know, oh, okay, there's something that I need to dig into further here. And maybe at that other end of the spectrum, the completely unaware, they're not going to be ready yet for a solution, and that's okay. But you have to still know what's going to be the trigger for them to get to that next level of awareness, so that they can continue to move along the different trigger journey until they get to that point that they know, you know what, I need this solution and I need it now.
Yeah, that's great, because I think otherwise, like whatever offer you present, it's going to pass like a ship in the night, as David Ogilvy might have said.
Yeah, that's it.
In terms of structuring the offer, then, are you helping people to craft like more of a kind of standard offering, or is it generally more like a bespoke kind of solutions driven, where it depends on the clients?
Yeah, I would say the way that the offering gets packaged together, it's almost like it's basically the tip of the iceberg. There's a whole lot of stuff that you have to uncover, before that. And yes, you know, we do help people with packaging things. A lot of people, they come to us and they're a place where they have a lot of pre-thought. They have a lot of stuff that has been, it's either in the head or it's somewhere on paper, or it's like bits and pieces of different things that they've, you know, scribbled in their notes, like all over the place, but it's not actually put together. And yes, absolutely, there's like structures to, you know, help to put all of that together. But I would say the biggest hurdle is in really just even understanding the components that would make up that offer. And that's actually the biggest question to answer. Like when you understand those components, it's literally a matter of putting it together like a jigsaw puzzle. you just slot those things into the offer. And yes, there's a little bit of like packaging it up and all of that stuff. But unless you know those big blocks and you're fundamentally able to answer those really basic questions that sometimes I ask, really established businesses, and they can't answer it. What is it exactly that you sell, and why do customers buy you? And unless those big questions are actually, clear, it's going to be very difficult to put together an offer that and make it sound compelling, just because it hasn't actually been connected yet to a market need. So I would say a big part around, getting that offer right is less so around the structure of it, just like, putting it together.
It's not formulaic.
Creating a sales page, or it's creating a brochure, or, even just a letter that you can send out to your prospects. But it's actually, it's actually that initial sort of creating the hypothesis around what this offer may be, getting it tested, getting it validated, seeing, is it actually, are you hitting on something that the market really wants? Like, is it a hot market? And then only then actually looking at how do we package this in a way that's going to be the most attractive and make sure that the best message comes out the forefront.
I'm definitely in the club of having created things that the market doesn't actually want, even though it was a great idea and they could have really benefited from it, but they didn't know that or think that. So
yeah, I think every business owner has been there, and the ones that say that they haven't are probably just, not really wanting to, or maybe feeling bad about some of these failures. But yeah, absolutely. I mean, I sent out an email just.
It's a fact of being an innovator and creating products, is that we know the products much better than the audience does, and that's just a fact of life. And
that's it. We are so much in that solution mindset that we miss the fact that we actually need to take our clients along on that journey. Like, we know the solution, we know their problem, but I think a lot of the times we're in conversations, we miss the fact that they need to first recognize that they're having a problem and almost do that solution solving thing in their own heads and come along on that journey before they're ready to buy. But yeah, I mean, this failure thing, I mean, a lot of what we're teaching now, it comes from our own grounded experience of having had offers that flopped, things that we put out into the market and nobody bought.
At the risk of putting you on the spot, would you talk through an example either of one of your own products or maybe one you worked on with the clients?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I'm happy to give an example just from our own experience. So this was very early on in our business journey. At that point, I was still a one-woman band, and we launched a course, and basically the idea was that I wanted to create a branding course, putting together all of the different knowledge around like different areas. And I had tested it a little bit. So I had like at that point, just worked with a few people that, were already in my network, and I knew that they wanted to work with me. And they decided to say yes to join my branding course. And, we ran this course a couple of times with a cohort of, 3 cohorts in total. Was probably about 15 to 20 people. And I thought, well, okay, so I've sold it a couple of times. So that definitely means that I must have a great offer, and I'm ready to scale this and start selling this to the masses. Yeah, so what happened was that I decided like, okay, I've been delivering this course live for the last few months. So now we're going to create a course that is just going to be standalone and something that will be a passive product that is going to generate money passively while we focus on other things. And so off we went in the back, sort of like tinkering and building this product. And I say we because, at that point I had started building a team. So I hired my first team members, and we spent 2 months basically not doing any business development, just like literally stopped sales dead. And because we wanted to focus all the energy on building this fantastic product that was going to, basically get our business to take off. So 2 months of time, just like building this product, creating the perfect marketing campaign, pulling out all the stops in terms of like a content plan. There was like advertising, there were like taglines, there were sales pages and, different link backs and all of that stuff. And everything was just like perfectly orchestrated. And we launched it, and crickets. Literally crickets. Nobody bought a thing.
and the world yawned in your face.
Yes, pretty much. So that was a very, I would say, very expensive and heavy lesson learned. And luckily at the time, we had other pillars in our business, so we still had a little bit of consulting work that was going, so was able to get us through that period. But we literally had to, start from scratch and just start going back to the drawing board again.
Mm,
Yes, one of the
mm,
reasons that I am so passionate about this is because we have been through that burn. And I'm so thankful that we learned those lessons so early on in our journey. At that point, Christina was just starting to, come in, and she was obviously doing a lot of observation on the side. She wasn't yet fully involved in the business, so she still had enough of that distance to be able to give me perspectives and the things that she was able to see. And yeah, I mean, we, made a lot of, changes in terms of direction on what we were doing in our business, and we were able to get things back on track, once we were able to get that focus. But yeah, I mean, it isn't something that we've just heard from people, like you need to find the right focus, you need to do the validation, you need to do the testing, all of that stuff. It's literally coming from the fact that, we've been burnt and literally just wasted like thousands of pounds of advertising on marketing that didn't work.
mm. Is there scope for kind of adopting almost like an agile approach, to use a software analogy, where you kind of develop a smaller iteration of it and then get feedback on it sooner?
Yeah, very much so, very much so. So that's what we call the beta process. But the beta process also isn't enough, because like I told you in the beginning, I had sold the program to what I thought was already a small version of that, what I thought was already passing the beta process. But I hadn't made.
It could still have a faulty foundation and have a successful beta.
That's it. I hadn't made the leap. I hadn't actually cracked how to go from selling to somebody I know to selling to, somebody
people
who has never actually heard of me, who I don't have any credibility, no relationship with. And that's a really, really big leap. That's a really, really big leap that I think a lot of business owners, they've struggled to do, and that's why they fail in their marketing.
Is there perhaps one more tip we can give people before we sign off? One
tip.
big one, for someone listening, if there's one thing that they should perhaps even not know, perhaps mean that if they're crafting an offer, one thing they should perhaps think about.
Yeah, I think gosh, there's so many tips that I can give about this. I would say if there's really one tip that I can give is, if you are in that place at the moment where you're struggling in terms of just figuring out why is it that this offer just isn't taking off, or maybe you're in a place that you're just even figuring out what that offer is, I would say, go back to the last few projects that you've worked on, and just, if you had the opportunity where you actually recorded some of the conversations that you either had with clients, like go back and have a listen to those, and really ask yourself a few questions around, what was it about this? Like, firstly, did I enjoy this? So is it something that gave me joy? And, is it something that I see myself doing more of? And then if that is the case and you're really enjoying the person that you're actually working with, go back to that and really sort of like go back, re-listen, try to listen to what were the things that they were actually struggling with. Sometimes we're so much in our solution mindset that we're missing the real problems and the real trigger points that they're telling us. And yeah, just go back and listen and see what sort of insights that you're able to pull out of that.
How do people connect with you? How do people find out more about your work?
LinkedIn is probably the best place at this moment. We are on other social media platforms, so we do have Instagram and others, but at the moment, LinkedIn is probably still going to be the best place. We're actually also running an event. I don't know if that's still going to be relevant at the time that this podcast is going to be published, but we do run events quite regularly, all about helping people with their offers, and sharing a lot of the techniques that we work on behind the scenes with our clients. So yeah, LinkedIn is going to be the best place, and where you can also find out more information about these events.
Right, I'll put that in the show notes. Do you have a website that people can go to as well?
We do, yes.
What's the domain?
www.growyourbrandwithimpact.com.
Perfect. Great. Well, thanks for coming on, Angela. I've really enjoyed that conversation, and people should follow you on LinkedIn and pay attention to your stories, because I think you're doing a great job of it.
Oh, awesome. Thank you so much, Rob.
If you've enjoyed this episode of the Story Copywriter podcast, you'll want to make sure you're on my email list. When you sign up at storycopywriters.com/podcast, I'll also send you my 7-day storytelling crash course free by email. Please also make sure you've got a copy of my simple story selling book, which is available from Amazon in paperback and Kindle formats. Thanks for listening. I'll talk to you next time.